And this is what the Brussels EU is trying to protect. Last year, total sales of pharmaceutical drugs in the EU were valued at $253 billion. That's US dollars. Globally, last year, drug sales were worth $875 billion. Not million, billion dollars. By 2015, forecasts suggest that total drug sales will have reached $1,100 billion. That's $1.1 trillion, in fact. An astonishing, truly astonishing amount of money. But this, of course, forces us to ask a question. Because all over Europe, there are charities, medical charities, collecting money in aid of research into drugs for treating all types of diseases. So we have to ask ourselves, don't we, why on earth does the pharmaceutical industry need our money when it has an income, an annual income approaching $1 trillion a year? I would also like to say something about GMOs, not just because this is an important issue, but because there is a relationship between the companies producing GMOs and the pharmaceutical industry. First, let's look at the facts. The facts are that the Brussels EU is suppressing information on GMOs. It is trying to prevent the release of information that shows the dangers of altering the genetic structures of the elements contained in our food in this way. A few years ago, a group in the United Kingdom, Wales, one of the constituent countries in the UK, uncovered an attempt by UK and Brussels EU officials, which had apparently enabled a highly damaging study on GM maize produced by Monsanto to be covered up. The scientists who had seen the study were told not to talk about it. The study showed that this form of maize produced by Monsanto was dangerous to health. And that a major cover-up, in fact, was underway to protect Monsanto and the regulatory authorities who had said it was safe in the first place. But of course, despite these concerns, this variety of maize remains available for use, remains authorized for use throughout the Brussels EU. But there's more, because the plan of the Brussels EU, the intention of the Brussels EU, despite knowing that we don't want to consume these foods, is actually to boost production of them. Documents obtained by a British newspaper a couple of years ago show that European leaders want agricultural representatives and industry, which means Monsanto and their friends, to be more vocal, to be more outspoken, to counteract what they called the vested interests, get this, of environmentalists. In the real world, the vested interests are the companies like Monsanto, who stand to make billions of euros from these substances. You and I, if you like, the environmentalists, those people who are concerned for our health and the health of our families and the welfare of the environment, our views are categorized by the Brussels EU as vested interests. The complete reverse of reality, in fact. And what brings the issue of drugs and GMOs together is the issue of patents. Patents, as we shall see, are the key tools to control the world. Because patents on products, patents on pharma drugs and GMO seeds produce hundreds of billions of euros every year. But natural substances, vitamins, organic food, cannot be patented. You couldn't say, for example, that you invented vitamin C. It exists in nature. Pharmaceutical chemicals, of course, can be patented. They don't exist in nature and they are synthesized in laboratories. So, because of this possibility to patent substances and control markets, what you find is that many of the companies who are involved in pharmaceutical production are also involved in the production of GMOs. But let's not allow ourselves to think that this is simply a European problem, because it isn't. In fact, it's a global problem. The goal of the EU is to export its undemocratic model for government to the rest of the world. Already, around the world, there are several examples of EU-like governmental structures springing up. In Southeast Asia, we have the ASEAN, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. In Africa, we have the African Union. There are two EU-like bodies in South America, and so on. So, with this in mind, I think this is a good moment to look at the origins of the Brussels EU. Let's take a look at where it is that this structure came from. To do this, we have to go back in history about 60 years. And at this point, the Second World War was 2 years old. But the Nazi regime was maintaining official institutes, but with one purpose only: to prepare the future economic and political shape of the world for a Nazi IG Farben victory in World War II. IG Farben, I'll say a little bit more about those in a few moments, but IG Farben was the pharmaceutical and chemical cartel that financed the rise of the Nazis and that was deeply involved in the perpetration of World War II. But one of the institutes that the Nazis were maintaining was something called the Central Research Institute for National Economic Order and Greater Sphere Economy, and this was based in Dresden, in Germany. And the head of this office was this man here, Arno Scholter. In 1941, Scholter published the Nazi IG Farben cartel plans for a post-World War II Europe in a book. You can see it there. This book translates as the Greater Sphere Cartel, an instrument of industrial market order in a new Europe. And the significance of this book cannot be underestimated, because the parallels that it contains between the Nazis' plans for post-World War II Europe and what we have today, the Brussels EU, are absolutely astonishing. 3 examples. The European Commission is described in Scholter's book. The concept of an unelected executive body at the head of Europe.